Welcome into the Late Night Gamecock Show. I am your host, Matt Anderson, and with me, as always, is the great Alex Jones of thebigspur.com. Alex, man, how you doing? How's this week been?
Been good so far. Got that kind of last full week here before, we got preseason camp starting on Friday. Got Birdies with Beamer on Monday. It's kind of that last week before football really gets cranked up.
Are you going to be playing in Birdies with Beamer, or are you just there to be a media member?
I'll be playing, and playing may not be even the best term because I probably can't tell you how many golf balls I'm probably going to be losing at this thing, but we'll see.
Do you know who you're playing with yet?
No, not yet. The groups haven't been released.
Well, I think, didn't you have Coach Furry last year?
Yeah, it was me, Jordan K from the state, Mike Furry, and Clayton White. And it was like the three of them, and then it was just me down there. Like, they were carrying the team. I was just, every now and then, I'd give them a good drive.
One of my favorite things about that day, Alex, if I'm remembering correctly, is that's the day Malik Clark committed to Florida State.
Yeah. I think he actually committed while we were on the course too. So,
yeah. Did you notice anything with the coaches? Did they seem a little off, a little angry, anything like that?
Yeah, you knew when it happened.
Did you have a guest to tell them? Were you like, hey, by the way, Malik Clark?
Yeah, like it. You got the sense that, like, maybe, they thought it could happen, but then I think it was funny. You saw, like, I think was it Beamer tweet about something, and people jumped on him or something like that. And he's talked about that a few times. So it was kind of funny to see that. I guess
social media can be fun and it can be awful at the same time. But
yeah, and then it came full circle.
Well, Alex, on the show tonight, I mean, don't look now. The Gamecocks have kind of hit the ground running on the recruiting trail the last couple of weeks. Last Wednesday, right before we came on the show, Kamari Blair committed to South Carolina. And then Thursday, a little surprise commitment from Tristan Lewis, safety out of Greenwood. We'll talk about him a little bit later. And then the big one was Friday night when Landon Duckworth officially rejoined. Rejoined the recruiting class this year, which there's no doubt about it. Landon Duckworth is the centerpiece of the class as it stands right now. Then there were more fireworks. Shane Beamer sent out a welcome home Friday night, and everyone was wondering, is that Amari Thomas, who we're going to talk about a little bit later, is that just Landon Duckworth? He just got the news after, kind of weird to get the news right after it went public on the Big Spur. But anyway, yeah, so they're welcome home on Friday, and then a guy we've been talking about a lot, Koski Barnes, he announced that he has a commitment. What is that, the 26th of July?
Saturday, yeah.
And then Amari Thomas, for some reason I have August 9th in my head. I don't know if Hale said that or where I got it from.
I think that's it.
I think it's, but don't hold us to it.
I'm pretty sure that's what it's going to be.
So there's a lot going right now in Gamecock football recruiting. We're going to hit it all. We're going to talk about the football season coming up. We're going to close the show out tonight with Alex and I ranking the easiest to hardest games on the Gamecock football schedule. And then in between, Alex, we still got to talk about LSU and we still got to talk about Oklahoma. One of those games being on the road. Alex, as a media member, I'm going to hit you rapid fire. You can't say South Carolina because you go to all the South Carolina games as a media member, but what SEC football stadiums, or you can use any football stadium, any college stadium or college game you've been to as media, who has the best food for the media?
The two times I've been to Kentucky, it's been pretty solid food.
Okay.
I remember the first time we were there. I can remember what we had the first time. I can't remember what we had this past season. But the first time it was like barbecue, like a whole barbecue set, whole tray. Like, it was really good. There's been a few pretty good food options. Like Clemson's is pretty good. Like they do like food before. I think it's both been noon games. So you had, I think it was like breakfast before. Then they did like hot dogs and hamburgers at halftime. So there's a few, but I'd say those two from a food standpoint stand out.
All right. What media box has the fewest, we'll call them actual media members in it at a given time? We all know the one you're thinking about. Are there any others in the SEC?
I'm trying. No, not really, to be honest.
Yeah, pretty professional. All right. What has the best view of the game? Where do you get the most action from?
Georgia's was really good. I've only been there once, but you're you're lower than Williams-Brice is, but it's also an open air press box, which is really cool because you can actually hear, everything. Which, from a Williams-Brice perspective, the press box is nice because it's like, obviously it's a little bit high. You get a little bit of a higher view, but I guess it can be a little bit quieter in there just because I think if that glass is really thick, you can hear when it gets loud in the stadium, but you don't get the full experience. But Georgia, when I think 2 or 3 years ago when South Carolina played there, it's open air press box, so you get the full experience, which is pretty cool.
All right, what has been the most uncomfortable press conference you've ever been in the room for? And that can be college football, college basketball, college baseball, whatever. You pick one.
What's uncomfortable from
where there's gonna be a lot of tough questions that are gonna be asked, and you're wondering what the reaction is gonna be because it's not gonna be good. And you don't have to say South Carolina. I'm sure Shane's had a couple.
Yeah. I'm trying to think that Florida game 2 years ago, would that have been two? But the Florida game before Tennessee and Clemson game, that was obviously South Carolina just had a rough game, so that you figured that one was going to be rough. That's about the only one off the top of my head right now I can remember.
Do you ever go to any opposing coaches' press conferences?
No, I haven't. We normally handle just the South Carolina stuff. Normally from a you'll have the visiting media members, and then all that stuff gets posted online. But I haven't been to opposing team one.
All right, well, Alex, let's roll that intro and let's get into the rest of the show. Good answers though. That was fun.
Gonna turn on the late night show. Hear what's going down in Cool Town. I said I'm turning on late night show. Yeah, my Cox will let me down.
So, Alex, man, I can't get enough of that intro. Big props again to JC Sherwood. That's really cool and really sets the mood. Yeah, sorry, Steven. We don't get to play Clowns Are People Too. It's one of my favorite songs. Actually, it helps me go to sleep at night. When I can't go to sleep, I don't count sheep. I sing that song. But, Alex, look, man, the Gamecocks are back inside the top 25 college football rankings after a busy week on the trail. As of this afternoon, I think the Gamecocks were 25th. I'll be honest, I haven't checked since about 4 o'clock today. So that might have changed. They might have gone up, might have gone down, but, hovering right around there in the top 25. Alex, how familiar are you with the famous blue chip ratio?
Pretty familiar. I think, obviously from, I guess, South Carolina perspective now, I'd say that ratio is pretty high for this class.
Yeah, so if you don't know what the blue chip ratio is, Bud Elliott of 24/7 Sports kind of coined this, and it's just a measurement that he used to say who has the most raw talent. And when he started this, it was back before transfers and NIL were as prevalent as it is now. So when you weigh in the transfers to the overall roster, things can skew. But the basic math is, how many 4- and 5-star players do you have in your recruiting class year in and year out, divided by the total number of kids in the class? So the way that Bud Elliott phrases it is that you need to be above 50% to have any chance really at all, a realistic opportunity to play for a national championship. And basically he's saying win a national championship, not just play for one. He does say that certain coaches can get more out of less talent. You can have leadership. You can have that one elite player that helps carry you, carry that roster. But overall, he thinks somewhere in the 60 to 70% range is where you need to be a perennial college football contender. So I'm not a fan of blue chip. I'm not a fan of the blue chip. I think that, all Gamecock media folks love when 4 and 5 stars commit because it means that people are happy on the message boards. So the higher the blue chip ratio, until the team starts stinking on the field, the Big Spur is a happy place. But right now the Gamecocks have 13 commitments. And Alex, I just went and looked on 24/7 Sports. 9 of them are ranked as 24/7 Sports composite 4-star players. So 9 out of 13, that's what, 69.2%.
Yeah, that's pretty good. I mean, and you think about, from a numbers perspective, what this class could end up being like, maybe in that 20 range, somewhere in there. And, they also have to factor in, like, some guys, there's still going to be some movement within the rankings as well. Guys aren't set on, some guys could move up to, if a guy's sitting in that, 88 to an 89 range, he can move up into a 90. Maybe there's somebody who falls from a 90 to 89. Like, I think there's going to be some guys continuing to move up. Like a guy like Sequel Patterson, I think he's a guy that's, right up there as one of those guys who can move up in the rankings. You just look at where he was ranked in that 27 class before he reclassified. He was a top 20 player in the country. So still going to be some movement from a rankings perspective. And obviously, still some of the targets out there for South Carolina. Like it's going to be really interesting to see where this class ends up. And, it's one thing you kind of look at it, it's probably – it's going to just depends on who they get from, commitment standpoint. But, I think the one thing you can look at is just where, from an average perspective, that's the big thing right now with this class is the average rating per player is really high and, at least top 15 in the country last I checked. So that's something that's really encouraging.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where I think when I have a free Saturday, which are very few and far between, and we're getting closer to having no free Saturdays when it comes to a couple weeks, I might just sit there and look at the 24/7 Sports and, the actual numerical grade, 88, 89, 90, whatever it is, and say, okay, is there some type of pattern with national championship caliber teams and the secondary is above this level? I don't know. I'll figure it out. But for right now, we're using the blue chip ratio. Going back to the last year's recruiting class, the 2025 class, Alex, signed 26 kids. 13 of them were 4 or 5 stars. So that's a 50% ratio. If you go back to the 2024 class, and Alex, this is kind of when we started together, and we just talked about how it is a small class, but it is a really good class. Mm-hmm. And of those 15 signees, 10 were a composite 4 or 5 stars. So 66.7% blue chip ratio. So if everything holds and the Gamecocks add no more recruits, the blue chip ratio of the last 3 high school classes is 59.2. And 60 to 70% is evidently where you want to be a perennial national title contender. So you can go ahead, Alex.
To your point about that 24 class, I mean, look at who was in that class and what they've been able to do so far. Like Dylan Stewart, I mean, enough said, Josiah Thompson, Michael Smith, Fred Johnson, like the top end of that class so far from a rankings perspective has really, shown out in their rankings. I think that's one thing that you see, like that you kind of talk about from a coaching staff evaluating, finding maybe the diamonds in the rough. But you also have to evaluate the, high 4-star guys or the 5-star guys and make sure that that's, they are that good. And I think you've seen South Carolina staff do that very well. A lot of those top end guys and a lot of their classes have, really, risen up to their rankings.
And I think a lot of that is the way they recruit too, Alex, that they start these relationships so young that they get to watch the maturity and the body growth and the skill growth. And by the time a kid gets his 4-star ranking, oftentimes the Gamecock coaching staff already has them on their board ranked in a particular order. But yeah, I just think that's so interesting, Alex. That's, hovering at, 60%. And, the Gamecocks are going to get at least a couple more 4 stars, I would imagine. And you don't know how big the class gets. If it gets to 20, you get 2 more 4 stars and you're above 50% again for the 3rd consecutive year. So don't get bogged down in quantity of recruits, especially in the summer. Teams load up and they start getting 26, 30 commitments, and that recruiting ranking, team ranking shoots up, even though the quality isn't necessarily there. And what South Carolina does, Alex, and we're going to talk about some specific recruits here in a second, but what they do with the portal and just filling the gaps, even if it's just a 1 year, 2 year while someone develops, if you're hitting a high blue chip ratio and you're holding on to a lot of those guys, and there's only a couple of the guys that are no longer with the program, and one of them was an off the field incident. It wasn't that, didn't want to be here. So yeah, pretty cool nuggets there. Alex, let's talk about the recent commitments. I think you got to start with Landon Duckworth. He's a centerpiece. We've all known about Landon Duckworth for, it feels like 2 years now, but Can you take us through this recruitment saga and how we ended up where we ended up?
Yeah, so it was a really early commit for South Carolina, really early as far as in his process, and kind of he backed off that pledge. Actually, I was thinking about it, Matt. Like I don't know if you remember, we were live on the air when he decommitted and I had to jump off the show and get on the site for it. But I just remember that the other day. But he backed off the pledge and had to go through the coaching changes really with South Carolina from Dow Loggins was one kind of leading that recruitment, and South Carolina really just stayed in the hunt. I think that's Shane Beamer played a part in that with the way he recruited Landon Duckworth, and then I think Mike Schuler really started building that relationship, and they really just continued to grow. And it came down to South Carolina and Auburn. Ole Miss was also in there for a while, and Florida State as well, but it came down to South Carolina and Auburn, and then South Carolina after that official visit, started feeling really good about their chances to land him. And he still had that unofficial to Auburn, but then came back around to South Carolina that final weekend for the dead period. And it was trending South Carolina's way for a while. And just really, we've talked about like a really big get because he can do it all. Really, he's talented he has a talented arm, but also can do it with his legs. And I think just kind of fits what they're trying to do in the system offensively.
And thankfully, Mike Shula coached Cam Newton. I'll say that because Lenore Sellers mentioned that SEC Media Days, and Landon Duckworth is in the same mold. Maybe not quite as big as Cam by the time he got back to Auburn or even as a high school recruit, but a kid that can move, and he's going to get those Lenore Sellers comparisons. I didn't think that it was fair that Luke Doty got Connor Shaw comparisons, or Steven Garcia got Steve Tannehill comparisons. They're all different players, and they're all great in their own way. But Landon Duckworth certainly is one that moves the needle.
And I think, one thing that, I mentioned this earlier today, I think one thing for Landon that's kind of sticks out for what South Carolina looks for is, Shane Beamer's talked about multiple times with Cutter Woods and Lenore is those guys are winners. Cutter Woods is a state champion, Lenore Sellers is a state champion. Landon Duckworth is the same exact thing. He's winning state titles in football at Jackson High School in Alabama. I think he's won a state title in track and basketball as well. So he's a winner, and I think just kind of fits exactly what they're looking for from all things. And just in his game too, like I mentioned, he went to the Elite 11 camp last month, and that camp is so kind of structured, just almost more for where I'm a pocket passer type of thing. But he showed out through the arm, like he was named to the Elite 11 class, and that just goes along with what he can do with his legs. So just a really good get for South Carolina.
Absolutely. He's a two-time state champion in basketball. And as a sophomore and junior, his 4x100 track team has won the Alabama gold medal. Yeah. And he's a part of that team. And then football last year won a state championship. So just a well-rounded athlete, well-rounded kid. Just to throw a couple stats at you here. Over his last two seasons, he's completed 63.7% of his pass attempts for 5,400 passing yards, 12.3 yards per pass attempt, and has a combined 66 touchdown passes versus only 14 interceptions. Oh, and he can also run, as we've mentioned. Last year, he rushed for 648 yards and 12 touchdowns. So,
yeah, the Jackson High School is really good. You got Landon Duckworth,
evidently,
yeah, and then you got Xavier Crow, running back Xavier Crowell, who's committed to Alabama. Then he's also got a 4-star. Keon Chapman's committed to North Carolina, a 4-star wide receiver, and I think there's another one. But it's a loaded team, and they're, as you can see, are pretty good.
So evidently, Landon makes those guys 4 stars. That's what we'll say. The next one was a bit of a surprise for me, Alex. Honestly, I was not tracking this kid. We've done our recruiting board on this show. We love talking recruiting. We've done it pretty much every show for the last 4 or 5 episodes. Maybe not quite that many, but 3-star safety, Tristan Lewis out of Greenwood, South Carolina, 6'4" ish, 6'3", 6'4", 200 pounds. Plays quarterback for his high school team. Alex, did you know about this kid? Because I didn't.
Knew a little bit about him, and then he came in the summer for camp, and you really started to hear like there was a lot of momentum there. Just you wanted, or at least something that you wanted to track, and South kind of saw him. I think came in for a camp and then brought him back in, and really liked what they saw, and then it was one of those that was kind of like an old school recruitment. I think that he got the offer, and that same day, not too long, he was ready to commit. So I think you knew that was, South Carolina was the place he wanted to be, but really, really intriguing. Like you mentioned the size, like he's 6'3.5", 200. Kind of, we talk about all the time exactly what Torian Gray looks for in the secondary, and guy that is also an athlete, as we mentioned. Like he can. I think he hit 92 or 93 on the mound here on one of these past weekends. So just a really interesting athlete. And you see some similarities just from like how our recruitment goes. Like DQ Smith was the same type of thing. The Tristan played some quarterback at Greenwood. DQ Smith played quarterback at Spring Valley before South Carolina moved into safety. Like obviously, from a 6'3.5", that I'm not comparing him to Nick Emenwari, but you see some of the from a size perspective the same thing. So it's one of those things that it's an under the radar South Carolina in-state pickup for South Carolina that a lot of times has worked out for this staff.
Yeah, and some sources have very casually thrown out some Stephon Gilmore comparisons at the way that he has to play quarterback for his high school team because he's the best athlete on the team. Yeah. And some colleges were actually recruiting him and evaluating him as a quarterback. And if you can sling a baseball in 92, 93, I'm pretty sure you can sling a football as well. I don't want to say that this was 100% they missed on Tamarian Watkins, so let's go find a Tamarian Watkins type. But if you're going to miss, and I'll say miss right now, that I don't think that recruitment is over. But if you're going to miss a couple days later and pick up a project like this, I mean, you said it. It's a Torian Gray special.
Yeah, I mean, it's a guy that, he was unranked before committing to South Carolina. And once South Carolina started to get on the radar, like he's a guy that, when the national kind of evaluators looked at him, like went ranked straight up to an 88. Right? It was a 3-star, which 2 spots away from a 4-star. Like you can see that there's in this film, there's a lot there to like, and South Carolina just evaluated him pretty early and found out. And as we've mentioned, Torian Gray knows what he's looking for in those secondary members, and it seems like he fits that perfectly.
I agree. And look, if you're going to go take a kid out of Greenwood High School and that's a safety, I think that there's a good track record there with DJ Swearinger out of Greenwood, who South Carolina flipped from Tennessee. If you forgot, he was one that was going to commit to South Carolina. Flipped it, or committed to Tennessee. I remember I was at the movies that night with my current girlfriend, my now wife, and I was like, it's just a 3-star. How little did I know?
Yeah.
All right, so we're going to talk quickly about 2 more guys that have announcements coming up, Alex. The first one is Amari Thomas, a 4-star running back out of Blountstown, Florida. Stands 5'10", 187 pounds. I've watched this film. I watched it a couple months ago, and when he first came on the radar, and I rewatched it over the weekend. He's very quick with his first cut. Like he seems to be able to read the defense pretty well, and he gets up to top speed. I mean, he bursts through the hole. He can stop on a dime and then get back up to full speed again. I don't know if he has track star speed, but I don't see many people catching him. Now, those are highlights. But it just seems like he can get from 0 to 100 in 5 yards, stop, and get back up to 100 in another 15 yards.
Yeah, it's the kind of the twitchiness and the explosion, I think, is what you like and what you see him on those highlights. And it really kind of an instant recruitment. Like he was one that had been committed to Florida State, and South Carolina really started to gain some momentum. And he came in on that official visit, and South Carolina had the momentum. It really coming out of that official visit, and it was one of those where he was going to. He already knew he was going to go to Florida State for an official visit, and with him being at Blountstown, that's right outside of Tallahassee, you wondered could Florida State kind of recapture that momentum and hold on to it, but he decommitted, and I think South Carolina has a really good shot here in this one, and he's already got that decision date of August 9th, and I feel good about where South Carolina stands.
Yeah, he runs with good contact balance. Like I said, he can bounce off tacklers. He showed some hands. At least one pass, it was kind of like a running back wheel route where he just leaked out, and he had to wait on the ball, turn around, and kind of wait a little bit longer until it reached his breadbasket. But he caught that for a touchdown. He had some other passes that he caught. Really excited. I mean, kind of small for a running back, but I mean, if you go back to, oh my gosh, what is his name? Oh, he was a running back at Tennessee. Oh, smaller guy. Plays for the Dolphins now. Why am I blanking on him? He was a rookie last year. Anyway,
Yeah.
Kind of like that, or the guy from Alvin Kamara from the Saints. I can see a little bit of that, maybe a little bit of Maurice Jones-Drew. And look, I'm not saying he's going to be a perennial Pro Bowler. I'm just saying like the type of running style that you might be familiar with.
Mm-hmm.
The next kid is Koski Barnes, a high 3-star out of Greensboro, North Carolina. Stands 6'3", 190. Another Torian Gray special. He loves those longer DBs. You watch his film, he plays wide receiver as well. I think sometimes he takes a wide receiver mentality to jump balls as a defensive back. I think, just watching him, I think he could play wide receiver at the college level, maybe not the SEC, I don't know, but he could play both sides of the ball, which is always a plus. And then on top of that, I think he could be a really good safety in time too. Just the way that he quickly diagnoses plays, he can go jump up, play the ball in the air. 6'3", 190. Maybe Torian has a type.
Yeah, when you see 6'3", like you see like that's a Torian Gray defensive back. But you mentioned it like in his highlights, you see him playing some wide receiver, and when he's playing DB, you kind of see how that he can kind of high point the ball, he can track the ball, and that helps him. But he also gets it done at wide receiver too. And I think as you mentioned, like you see some safety, but I think you can see a lot of corner there, especially with those long arms. And that's again exactly what you look at Judge Collier. You see some of that from a long arm perspective. O'Donnell Fortune, same kind of thing, just as long, lanky type of guys. And really, South Carolina, he's one that he kind of emerged in the spring for a lot of teams. Kind of came out of nowhere, and he scheduled the official visit. South Carolina got on him really early, and I think one thing that sticks out to him is kind of the track record that Torian Gray does have with putting DBs into the NFL, be it at South Carolina or at his other stops throughout his coaching career. So I think South Carolina is in a good spot heading into that Saturday commitment, and it's just one of those where South Carolina has made an emphasis on getting back into the state of North Carolina, and if you're able to go and you already got the Harris twins, you got Noah Clark in the class, and if you're able to land a Kasai Barnes, like that's another guy from Grimsley High School, which is kind of one of those powerhouses there.
So it's Kasai Barnes.
I think I said that. I'm like, I think that's right. I need to.
I don't know. I never know. I never know until Todd Ellis tells me, like I say all the time.
Yeah.
But one of the things I will say about Barnes that I liked when he's playing DB at his height, 6'3", 190, that's not far off a Donovan Murph if you're just looking for a size comparison. But when he tracks a wide receiver, and maybe it's a comeback route or it's a jump ball or something like that, he almost plays basketball and boxes the defender out and covers not the defender, the receiver. Yeah. And it's very difficult to get balls behind him when he can diagnose the play and get in front of the wide receiver. But a lot of that probably worked for a lot of DBs, right, Alex? I'm not.
Yeah, and you also see, you watch his highlights, you see he's not afraid of contact. Like you see him coming up and playing and the run some. You see him, if a guy catches the ball, he's there and he's going to hit him. You see a little bit from a highlight. I'm comparing the highlights. So you see a little bit of what you saw from Chris Hatfield last year, just kind of same thing. Those tall, kind of physical corners that you see some similarities there.
I see a little Devontae Holloman in him. I really do. Yeah, I see some Devontae Holloman. I've seen some questions in here really quick. We're going to go through, what we're looking at, the kind of the players that we're still tracking. And as Alex mentioned, and we talked about it, we may be talking about 20 kids in this class. I don't think they're going to blow it up to 25, 26. I think they're going to be very selective, and then they're going to fill holes in NIL money with transfer portal. Not that these recruits aren't getting NIL. Misspoke there, but they're going to fill out the roster and the needs with the portal. But we're not tracking any quarterbacks. We're tracking at running back Amari Thomas. We've already talked about him. Wide receiver, just to a degree, Brody Keefe and Amiri Acker. Those two, especially Brody Keefe, I think that if the numbers work out and you can fit him in the class just because of the raw potential he showed as a junior before he got hurt, I think that's why his name is still lingering. And look, you can't fault the kid for wanting to get a Duke education at all. And then with Acker, he committed to where did he go, to Rutgers or something like that? Liberty. Yeah. Committed to Liberty. He's still committed right now. That one kind of came out of left field. He just got offered by South Carolina and he commits to Liberty. Liberty's got some money, so maybe he's getting a nice NIL deal or a good one for a player that is evaluated the way he is, a 3-star. And for better or worse, until the end of time, 5 stars are going to get the most money, then 4 stars, and depending on team needs, and then 3 stars. So not saying anything against his talent level. Tight ends really just Caden Ramsey. Offensive line is just Darius Gray at this point. He's a 5-star, top 20 kid in the country. We've talked a lot about Darius Gray. LSU, South Carolina right now are the 2 to watch, and flip a coin. I know Gamecocks feel really good, but so does LSU. Defensive end, you have the Gustav Henriques Ross, who Hale actually confirmed the other day on the Big Spur in the VIP room that the Gamecocks are pushing to add him in the class. So that was news.
Yeah, he came in this summer. He's part of that, I think it's PPI group, and he's from Sweden. And I kind of heard about him before, and then kept my eye on him. He had a pretty good day at that camp, and you see what they like.
Oh yeah, he looks.
Yeah, he's pretty solid. Like, he had a pretty good day there, and just kind of fits what they look for at that edge spot.
I mean, tell me the difference between him and Leo Delaney from a physical standpoint.
Yeah,
maybe Leo's got him from a little bit of a thickness standpoint, but good looking prospect. And then we don't talk about Zion, but Zion Lee is out there, and who knows what's going to happen in his recruitment. But I think every team in the country is keeping an eye on him, not just South Carolina. But I guarantee you South Carolina will throw their hat in the ring and have something to say if he does decide to look around from Maryland. And then you got Julian Walker, committed to Michigan. Yes, his dad works for South Carolina. Yes, the world burned down around Columbia when his son committed somewhere else. Keep an open eye on that one. Not saying that one's over. Defensive tackle, we'll see if they move on Emmanuel Ruffin. I don't know if he has a committable offer right now, but defensive tackle, they've kind of gotten what they need out of the recruiting class right now.
Yeah, and maybe Franklin Whitley's a guy to keep an eye on, guy out of Greenville High School, who I think they just want to see more game tape of him, but really intriguing guy that is, I think, just kind of starting to play football, but a guy to keep an eye on there.
Yeah, and then the last 2, Samari Matthews and Tamarian Watkins, we talked a lot about them. Let's see August 1st. That seems to be the general message. Let's see what these actual NIL deals can get across the finish line. And look, like I'll say it again, if these kids can get the amount of money that's been thrown around behind the scenes from Texas and Texas A&M, I might not tell my son to not take it. That can be life-changing money.
Yeah.
But I'd let him take the money, play 2 years, and finish the career at South Carolina, right? That's how you do it, Alex. All right. Well, when we get back, we're going to be talking about LSU, and we're going to be talking about Oklahoma. Do you want to just check one thing in here? We're not tracking any more linebackers right now, Alex, right? No. Ben Boulware, anything like that. Okay. Steven asked, do you feel that Torian has been underrated as a recruiter? I wouldn't say underrated, maybe by the fan base, but around the country, Torian Gray is known as not someone you want to go against.
Right. Hit the nail on the head with that.
Yeah, looking at some of this other stuff. If I missed your question, just let me know. But we don't know where Ben Boulware is going, Brandon Kuhn. All right, well, let's go ahead and hit a sponsor break, Alex. When we come back, we're going to be talking about LSU.
Mike here for one of the better dining options in the capital city. When I first moved there, I asked people around the radio station, where are the best wings? Well, the consensus was D's Wings. That was then. Today, they still have the best wings, but it's so much more. Now in their new location at 415 Meeting Street in West Columbia, yeah, they get voted the best wings on a routine basis. Yes, they get voted the best sports bar on a routine basis, but they're not just about wings, and really, they're not just a sports bar. It is a family-run local restaurant and bar with 20 TVs and 25 beers on tap. And how about these daily specials? Every Monday night at D's, you've got 75-cent wings from 4 until closing. Tacos on Tuesday. Then on Wednesday, 18 wings and a pitcher of beer for $29. You've also got ribs and oyster bucket specials on Thursday. And no matter how big the party is, 20 or more, no problem. Just call ahead of time and they'll take terrific care of you. They'll do takeout as well. And guess what? A human will answer the phone and take the order. Billy and his staff do an outstanding job. Check out D's 415 Meeting Street in West Columbia.
Yep, gotta check out D's. We love D's. Craig, congrats on getting your Virginia Tech tickets. Yep, I will be there, but I will actually be with my fantasy football league. We're making a long weekend of it. So Saturday during game day, I think it's the draft. Then we're going to watch football, and then Sunday we'll head over to the game. But really looking forward to it. But before, I guess after we get to Virginia Tech, we need to talk about LSU, who will be on the Gamecock schedule this year. That game is at LSU this year. First things first, Alex, LSU has a pretty interesting, I think, first 5 games of the season before they play South Carolina on October 11th. So in back-to-back weeks, or not back-to-back, in every other week. So LSU travels to Clemson to start the season. That is a big game. Tigers versus Tigers. I know there'll be a lot of eyes on that, especially in South Carolina. And Gamecock fans will be watching that to scout 2 future opponents. Then they have kind of a bye game. Then they host Florida 2 weeks after they play on the road against Clemson. Then they have another bye game. And then they travel to Ole Miss. And then they have a bye week before the Gamecock game, which they have scheduled the Gamecocks for homecoming. So, Alex, just your thoughts on what LSU could even be by October 11th.
Yeah, that's what's going to be interesting. Like that Clemson game, I think is just huge, and it's just one of those. As you know, Texas and Ohio State and Clemson LSU are the 2 games that everybody's going to be kind of watching on that Saturday slate of games. And I think when you look at those first 5 games, like if they're able to come out of that Clemson game with a win, like I think you feel decent about their chances coming into the South Carolina matchup undefeated. And I know we'll talk about South Carolina side too, but that could be if things go the way we think they could go for South Carolina, things could go the way we think they could go for LSU. That could be a really high-profile game in Death Valley.
It'll be interesting. We already know the Gamecock schedule that we've talked about the last couple of episodes leading up to this. We've kind of circled that at Missouri game. Well, Virginia Tech first, got to win that one, and then at Missouri as a game that can really turn the tides for the Tigers and the Gamecocks. But then October 11th, I found this interesting, Alex. I buy this every year. It's the only media magazine, preseason magazine I buy. I get Phil Steele. I know that Gamecock fans have mixed opinions on Phil Steele. Basically depends on where he has the Gamecocks ranked in the preseason, whether they like him that year or not. But, hey, that's the same thing for me and you, Alex.
Yeah.
How are we doing today in Gamecocks eyes? But just looking at it, here's how LSU stands in this preseason all-SEC teams. First team on offense, they have quarterback Garrett Nussmeier and wide receiver Aaron Anderson. They got nobody on the second team offense. On the third team offense, they have running back Caden Durham, and fourth team offense, none. So what stood out to me, Alex, is no offensive lineman for LSU ranked anywhere near his preseason top 4 teams.
And a lot of that is losing what they lost last year. Like they had a veteran offensive line, a really talented offensive lineman. Like they're having to replace, Will Campbell, who was both of their tackles. Like Will Campbell was the number 4 overall pick by the Patriots, and Emory Jones on the other side, he was also drafted, I think, a 3rd-round pick. And then you had on the interior, Miles Frazier and Garrett Dellinger were 5th and 7th-round picks. And they'll have DJ Chester back at center, I think is where he's going to be. But I mean, that's a lot to replace from an offensive line standpoint. But kind of the overall picture offensively, like it starts with Nussmeier. Like going into SEC media days, I think you thought it was going to be one of Nussmeier or Sellers as your first team quarterback, all SEC quarterback. But obviously Sellers got it. But he's also, you mentioned, got some weapons around him too. Aaron Anderson's really, really good. A guy that I think maybe a little underappreciated too from a national perspective. But they also got, Nick Anderson from Oklahoma, who I think is really intriguing. He didn't play last year. He was one of the, I think, 5 or 6 Oklahoma wide receivers that were injured throughout the year. But he had 798 yards last year or 2 years ago for Oklahoma. And I think, Carolina fans are, very, very familiar with Barry and Brown from Kentucky. Like he was one that, had really a few really good years there. And interested to see kind of when he gets a new opportunity, how he performs there because I think he's got all the talent in the world too.
Yeah, he's a kid that a lot of South Carolina fans wanted, and he's at LSU now. But just no offensive lineman. We'll see how they do. Obviously, LSU always recruits well. But this was what was even crazier to me, Alex. You look at LSU, and lately it's been about their offense, and their defense, couldn't stop a nosebleed. But for a number of years, it was LSU's defense and the defensive line, especially, well, secondary as well. pretty much every position group there. But on defense with Phil Steele, they do have a first teamer, linebacker Whit Weeks, a second teamer linebacker Harold Perkins. Gamecock fans might remember that name. A third team safety in AJ Halsey, and nobody on the fourth team. So Alex, as we go along the lines of scrimmages for LSU, nobody that's getting any preseason pub.
Yeah, which is interesting. Like, I think you have to imagine with, you feel like LSU is going to have somebody there that kind of shows that on both lines of scrimmage. And, Savion Jones and Braden Swinson were their kind of two, premier edge defender guys, and they were both the third and fifth round picks. But, the guy that I'm really interested to see for them is Patrick Payton, who is a Florida State transfer that he had something like 15, 16 sacks in 3 seasons at Florida State. And, it's just on the interior, like, I think the guy to watch there too is Dominic McKinley. That guy had 3 sacks last year, and so I think you feel like with LSU on the defensive line, they're always going to have guys there, and they normally recruit really well there. So you feel like somebody's going to step up there. But for sure, on both sides, offense and defense, on the line of scrimmage, there's a lot to replace for the Tigers.
Yeah, and when you look at Phil Steele's position group rankings for the SEC, he has LSU number 1 because he thinks Garrett Nussmeier, who he has him as his first teamer. For your records, Lenore Sellers, the third teamer, and Arch Manning's the second teamer, and then John Mateer, who we're going to talk about in a second, is the fourth team with Phil. But so he has quarterback ranked number 1 in the SEC, running back 6th, pass catchers number 1, offensive line number 12. So one thing that I think about just looking at that, Alex, is you can have the best pass catchers and the best quarterback in the world, but you don't want Spencer Rattler type amount of time in the pocket. So they got to step up. But that could be a spot where South Carolina does feel good about their defensive line, and maybe Dylan Stewart can wreak some havoc. Yeah,
I think that is kind of the one question you do have for LSU is on that offensive line. Like, you kind of mentioned, like, with Nussmeier, like he's mobile enough to get away from pressure, but I mean, maybe not from obviously not a Lenore Sellers type, but if you're getting pressure on, that's going to make them tough to get to those talented receivers. And I didn't mention, but Caden Durham, he's really good too. The guy was a freshman last year and really good running back for LSU. So that's kind of the question I think a lot of people are going to have for LSU is what they look like up front on both sides.
Yeah, no, you look at the defense. I do like when Phil does this. And I should have bought the magazine earlier, guys. Sorry. I'm just getting into football shape. But he has LSU ranked 7th at defensive line, 3rd at linebacker, 7th at defensive back, and 11th in special teams. So it looks like an opportunity the Gamecocks will have to – they'll probably have to outscore LSU at LSU. But last year it was no different than Williams-Brice. Basically, the team who scored last won the game. Not necessarily at the last second field goal or anything like that, like Gamecock fans have hoped to force overtime. But the last team that scores is going to win this one. Look, last season, South Carolina probably could have handily beat LSU at different points of that game. I'm not a big blame the refs guy at all. It doesn't matter what sport. They're doing the best they can. But that was the one time in my life watching that game, I really did think the fix was in at different points. I just couldn't comprehend the decisions that some of the referees were making. But what happens this year? Well, Alex, it's a flex game. So Gamecocks have a lot of those this year, which usually means you're a pretty good team, at least in the preseason.
I think you have to imagine with it being an LSU home game, like the odds of it being a night game are pretty high, especially because, like we talked about earlier, what the game could be with what could be on the line. But I feel like LSU, they're always going to get night games there.
Yeah, and look, it doesn't matter if the game's – so for the flex window, again, that can be 3:30 to 4:30 p.m. or 6 to 8 p.m. for kickoff. It doesn't matter. The end of the game is going to be under the lights in Baton Rouge, and that's going to be a crazy, crazy, wild environment. And excited for you to go to that one this year, Alex. But I just look at this, and I'm not going to give predictions. I'm going to get away from predicting the rest of the season because we're going to have a show on that. We'll have all our predictions. But what I am going to do is, if I had to set that line right now, Alex, I would set it at LSU minus 5.5.
That's exactly the number I was going to say. 5.5.
Yeah, they're going to give Gamecocks some respect, but at the same time, last year's game came down to a field goal. Lenore Sellers completely healthy. I would say minus 5.5. I think that they're going to want to. Vegas is going to want to make bettors earn their win. So 5.5 is a good number for that. If we're just talking spread right now, Alex, I would probably take LSU minus 5.5 if that was the spread today. I just think that there's more proven playmakers on offense than there are for the Gamecocks outside of Lenore Sellers, and that would scare me on the road in the real Death Valley.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, LSU. I mean, this may be one of the better rosters that Brian Kelly has, just because they. We talked about what they did lose on those lines of scrimmages and how that is very important in the SEC. But they bring almost all of their top weapons back offensively and got some. Those defensive backs. Ashton Stamps is really good, and he's back this year at cornerback for them. You always, and then I really like LSU's defensive coordinator Blake Baker. I think you mentioned him just a little while ago. Like he's really good. You saw what you could do at Missouri, and now having a second year under him, I think LSU's defense is going to take a step forward.
Yeah, and I reserve my right to change my opinion on this after I watch LSU play Clemson, Florida, and Ole Miss, and then obviously watch the Gamecocks play. I reserve my right to change my opinion, but right now I'd probably take LSU minus 5.5. So Oklahoma, Alex, this is the next one. That's October 18th, and October 18th, it's going to be in Columbia. It's going to be the State Fair game, and it's going to be this is definitely going to be an afternoon game. I think it's the 12 to 1 p.m. window. So if you want to hit the fairgrounds for parking, you're not going to be able to this year. So find another parking spot if you want to tailgate. I really think that this just is a weird matchup. It's going to be so different than last year, Alex. Last year, Oklahoma couldn't score points. Then their defense gave up the 10th most points in the SEC, but only gave up the 5th most yards per game. So how does that happen? Well, South Carolina helped that happen when they scored 2 defensive touchdowns in that game and made the game effectively over 6 minutes into it. Probably the most boring game I watched in totality all of last year was that game outside of the first 6 minutes. I didn't know what to do with the rest of my day. My wife was trying to give me a honey-do list. I was like, but the game's on.
Yeah, there just wasn't much offense in that game both ways. Like South Carolina won with they scored their first touchdown off that Nick Warrior interception, and got the rest of those points defensively. And they had their moments offensively too, but it just wasn't both sides. Wasn't a whole lot going offensively, but the defensive plays were pretty exciting.
Yeah, and Tonka got into the end zone. Always fun to watch big men in the end zone. But this year Oklahoma does welcome John Mateer. We've talked a lot about him. If you're not familiar with him, he was the starter at Washington State last year, put up over 3,300 yards passing and I think over 800 yards rushing, combined for like 44 touchdowns last year at Washington State. He's definitely proven at the college level, I would say. I'm sure we'll get Alex back in here in a second. But Mateer is proven at the college level, but let's not forget that he only threw 19 passes prior to becoming the starter last year for Washington State. We know he can run. We know he can throw. But my question is, how does he make the transition to the SEC? SEC is a different animal, and you're going to see looks that you haven't seen before. You're going to see bigger, faster, more powerful human beings running at you. And then Oklahoma has a lot to answer for last year. So, looking at it right now, is he going to be Diego Pavia on steroids, or is he going to be Diego Pavia?
Yeah, I think with Oklahoma, it's one of those where it's hard to sit here and preview them because I think there's such a team with so many key pieces and new players in key spots. I think it's just something that you want to see how they play in those first few games. The talent's there. You just mentioned Mateer had a really good year at Washington State, and then they got 2 really good running backs, and Javonte Barnes, who he was their top back last year with 577 yards. And then Jaden Ott's really good too, transfer from Cal that they added kind of late in the process. And so they've got some pieces back on both sides of the ball, but I think it's just one of those where you really kind of want to put eyes on them to see how they are, to see how things go early on in the season.
Yeah, and to your point, Phil Steele has Jaden Ott as his first team all-SEC running back. So that they have one first teamer in Jaden Ott. They have nobody on the offensive second or third team, according to Phil Steele in the preseason. And fourth team is quarterback John Mateer and wide receiver Deion Burks. Defense, they have nobody on the first team. They got a defensive end, R. Mason Thomas. Gamecock fans might remember that name. And then Kip Lewis as well linebacker. Those are second team all SEC. And then fourth team, nobody's on the third. Fourth team is defensive tackle Grayson Halton and defensive back Eli Bowen.
I kind of think we'll learn a lot about Oklahoma in week 2 when Michigan comes to Norman. That will tell us a lot about both teams, actually. But I think we'll learn a lot about Oklahoma there. And there'll be so many games there that you want to watch before they get to Carolina, with that Auburn game and obviously with the Red River rivalry with Texas. But I'm really interested in that Oklahoma-Michigan game, especially be with a home game. Like, feels like for Venables, it's almost a must-win.
Hey, Alex, I think we froze up there.
Yeah.
You back?
Yeah,
Cool.
we're good.
Yeah. So, I mean, Oklahoma does have an interesting schedule that you mentioned before they play South Carolina. Michigan week 2, Auburn week 4, and then Texas week before South Carolina. Alex, I think you'll actually learn the most about Oklahoma, not in that Michigan game, but in that Auburn game. Do they play up and down to their competition?
Yeah, I think so. Like, that's two teams that are kind of, Oklahoma and Auburn are kind of the same thing, where you really just want to see how things go for them early on. But that's the game that I think will be really exciting. And obviously, you're going to have the whole Jackson Arnold storyline around that one, but that one's going to be really interesting as well.
Yeah, must watch TV. I just want a camera on Jackson Arnold the entire time, and a camera on Brent Venables if Jackson Arnold scampers for 80-yard touchdown. Really quick, looking at Oklahoma's SEC ranks, 4th best quarterback room, best running back room, as Alex mentioned. Receivers kind of middle of the pack, 7th in the SEC. Offensive line, 5th. On the defensive line, Phil Steele has the defensive line ranked number 1, linebacker ranked number 1, DBs ranked number 9, and special teams 7. So, look, I think Phil has gotten some crap about how high he has Oklahoma this year. I think he has them 4th in the SEC, 4th or 5th. But if he believes in his position grouping rankings, that's exactly where they'll be. Yeah,
and and that's something that, with that Mitch game, that's why I think it all kind of lined up with how does John Mateer kind of transition to Oklahoma, and obviously bringing his offensive coordinator too with him. I think Ben about to butcher his last name, so I'm not even going to try to say it, but that he brought the offensive coordinator from Washington State with him too. So that's something that's really kind of interesting to watch, see how it kind of develops.
Yeah, how does the offensive coordinator and the player integrate into the SEC? Because you can be really good at calling up plays, but if the quarterback can't execute them, we've seen that at South Carolina before. I'm not saying that's going to be the case for John Mateer at all. This is October 18th is going to be another critical moment for both of these teams. Look, I do believe Oklahoma's going to have a really good defense, and I don't think they're going to have as many turnovers for points as they gave up last year. The offense really helping other teams' defenses out. So I would not be surprised to see Oklahoma, jump back in the top 6 of the conference at all. And the revenge we talked about for South Carolina against LSU on October 11th is going to be in reverse for Oklahoma. Not only do the Oklahoma players that are still there probably have a sour taste in their mouth about that game, but Brent Venables does not like losing to South Carolina, and he doesn't like getting embarrassed by South Carolina. So I expect a dogfight, Alex. If I'm making a line prediction here, I'm going to put it as Gamecocks -1.5. I think it's a coin flip game, really and truly.
Yeah, I can see it right in that range, 2.5. Again, like just sitting here making a line from what we think it could be today, but 3 weeks into the season, it could be totally different. But that's kind of the range I'd put it into.
Yeah, I think the Gamecocks are going to have a number of these, and that's actually very respectful for the Gamecock program, because it hasn't been long ago the Gamecocks were 13.5-point underdogs in these situations, and we're saying the LSU game might be 5.5. Oklahoma, a traditional blue blood, we're talking about a coin flip. That's where you want to be as a program. Quickly, Alex, do you want to hold off on doing our schedule rankings, because we are at an hour now? We could hold off and do that on a later show, or do you think we can knock it out real quick?
I say we let's go ahead and try to knock it out real quick.
Yeah, I agree. All right. How did you do this, Alex?
Okay, so I just did mine in a straight kind of ranking standpoint. I did on the site about a few weeks ago. I just did mine straight, least difficult to most difficult.
All right. While you give yours, I'm just going to quickly write mine down and So most difficult to least. So 1 to 12. Okay.
So
go
I'm
ahead.
going to start at South Carolina State. So I'm going to go from least to most difficult.
Okay.
All right. So first off was South Carolina State, and then I had Coastal Carolina. Third, I had Kentucky. And I had, well, I'll speed this up a little bit. I had Virginia Tech, then Vanderbilt, Ole Miss, at Missouri, Oklahoma, Alabama, at Texas A&M, Clemson, and then the most difficult game I said was at LSU.
Okay. So I did tiers. So I did tiers as tier 1 as the easiest opponent, kind of like DEFCON 1, 2, 3, 4. So DEFCON tier 1, South Carolina State and Coastal, which I think, you and I are lockstep there.
Yeah.
Tier 2, so DEFCON tier opponent 2. I had Virginia Tech, Vanderbilt, Missouri, and Kentucky all kind of lumped in there. If I had to rank those right now from least difficult to most difficult, I would say Kentucky is my 3, Vanderbilt my 4, and then at Missouri my 5, and then Virginia Tech my 6. I think South Carolina is better than Virginia Tech, but being the first game of the season, I think makes it difficult. So then my DEFCON tier 3 was at LSU, Oklahoma, Alabama, at Ole Miss, at Texas A&M, and Clemson at home. If I had to rank those, I'm just going to go hardest to easiest here. I think the hardest game on the schedule is at LSU. Following that, I think at Texas A&M, just a long way from home, and a very big stadium. Then I would put Alabama at home as the next toughest game. Then I would put probably Clemson at home, and then finish it out with at Ole Miss. But I could flip flop on at Ole Miss and Clemson for different reasons.
The Clemson one would be the one that I put on the next toughest for me, just because they got a lot of potential high draft picks defensively, and obviously Cade Klubnik took a step forward last year, but I put them a little lower or a little more difficult, I guess, than you did, just because I think they're going to have a pretty solid team this year.
I don't disagree. I think the Gamecocks have a very solid team too. I think my logic was home versus away.
Yeah, that's fair.
But look, when you're talking about at Ole Miss, I mean, they could implode. They really could. They probably have 60 to 70% of their roster who is not signed out of high school. So that is an NFL locker room that they're trying to manage over there. Then at Alabama, I said was going to be easier than Oklahoma was going to be easier than Alabama. So anywhere in there. Yeah, I got 6 games I think are going to be really tough.
So today, real quick on this, today ESPN kind of put out their swing games for each of the top 25 teams. What would be your swing game for South Carolina? I had a different one than what ESPN had. I mentioned this.
I think it's at Missouri.
That's what I had. They had at Texas A&M for South Carolina, and I would say Missouri just because it's earlier in the season. Like that's one of those games where you think about the chance of South Carolina potentially being undefeated going into that LSU game. That's the game everybody's kind of circling that could be potentially the most difficult. So that's why I kind of had them as that swing game for me.
Yeah, we talked about that, I think, last week on the show, Alex, or maybe it was 2 weeks ago. I can't remember. But that's going to be tough, and that's a long way away. And that's a team that wants revenge. Just, cause a freaking earthquake. Come on. But, yeah, that's going to be really tough. And we'll talk all about these games, especially leading up in the season and then also during the season. So, yeah, Alex, I think that was pretty fun. Before we get out of here, Alex, anything on Rasul Fajan? Alex dared me to try and pronounce the name today.
To answer the question, no, there is no new updates on Rasul Fajan.
Rasul Fajan. Wash on, wash off. Rasul.
I was starting to think we weren't going to get one.
Well, Alex, this is always a lot of fun, and we appreciate everyone that hangs out with us. When you spend your time with us on Wednesday nights, I know that 8 to 9 o'clock, you're really giving up something, whether it's family time, whether it's your favorite TV show, movie you've been trying to watch. So it's never underappreciated. We appreciate it so much, and we thank y'all for being here with us. We'll be back next week, Wednesday at 8 o'clock. Really quick, Alex, we're going to be talking about Alabama and Ole Miss next week on the show. So that'll be exciting. Let's go do our homework, and we will see y'all Wednesday at 8. Have a great one, everyone. See ya.